pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, here I am in the studio solo today because I am super stoked, excited to cut this episode to motivate people and to debunk any excuses that you can't get into real estate because you have no money. Well, first of all, if you don't know my story, I do have a book out. My name is Steven Van Kallenberg. I am the Savvy Landlord. You can get it on Amazon or my website. You can go to savvyinvestors.com or you can go to savvyradioshow.com. Anyway, I started in real estate about 1999 with no money, and I thought it was impossible. But I did owner finance. I saved $2,000 and started buying real estate. Anyway, I did that for a while, and I really wanted to get into real estate. I knew that to be wealthy, you got to own real estate. So then eventually in 2006, I got a real estate loan from a bank, and it wasn't too difficult. But I knew one day that train would end. That they would stop lending to me. And, I'm writing a book right now called Savvy Money, and about helping people to contact banks and raise money to buy real estate, to buy assets, to create wealth. Well, anyway, the big topic that I've had for a while here on the radio show, if you've been listening, is called private money. Well, what is private money? And I went to a seminar about 6 or 7 years ago with a great friend, Kenny Malabag, and I was one of those attendees that bought the $2,000 Alan Cogill course and never read the thing. But I knew one day that I would need private money because I knew that real estate creates wealth, and I knew that I would need to borrow money somewhere, somehow. So I got together with Pat Poynton, and we started doing the radio show and to help people and encourage people to do private money. And inside of me, I was like, I'm kind of conflicted because I've never raised private money. I don't even know how to do it. I've known about it. I've taught tons of people. And then the ball really smashed me when Brian Nix was on the radio show. And he, for 9 years, basically that's all he's been doing is buying real estate through other sources of funding, which is private money. So I was like, man, I've got to do it. Law of attraction. So I picked up the phone and dialed a friend in Chattanooga. His name is Thomas. And I was like, hey, I got this deal and I need to close on Thursday, which is like one day away, which has just created more stress in my life. And he's like, well, how much do you need? And I said, 15 grand. I have 15 in my savings. I really don't want to use my savings to close this deal, but he's like, okay, how much you want to pay for it? I was like, I don't know. I've never done this before. And he said, how about $1,500? And I said, okay. He's like, when will you pay it back? Well, I only need it for a couple of months. Let's just say 3 months. So September 30th, I'll pay it back. Well, within an hour, this guy, wonderful friend, went to the bank and wired to my title company 15 grand. I was like, this is too easy. Now, granted, I've built a relationship with Thomas, and he's known me, and we've been together, we've traveled, we've even been on a cruise together. But I originally met him at the Mr. Landlord conference just almost a year ago. So just within 12 or 13 months connected, and he wired me 15 grand. And he's experienced. I've learned a lot from him. He's coached me, and he's a wholesaler, and he does loan money to people. He's borrowed money. So he definitely had the more education than I did. So I was like, okay, great. So then I'm rolling around. I'm like, I'm so excited. I'm going to do my first private money deal. And it went through. It was flawless. And then I'm going to teach a class with Pat the next day. I can't wait to stand in front of the students and say, hey, I did it, private money. Well, then, boom, I came up with another idea. Why don't I just raise another 15 grand? And I was like, why not? So what I did is I picked up the phone and called a long-term friend that I met at a Bible study one time, and we've been just keeping up through the years. He's a very successful business owner, has some real estate. I don't think he's ever loaned private money before, or maybe he has. He's definitely a financial wizard of sorts. And I called him up, And I said, hey, I need to borrow 15 grand for a deal that I'm buying for 30. No. He was like, well, how much you want to pay for it? Well, this time I was a little educated and I said, how about $500? And I'll pay it back in 3 months and no big deal. And I was like, man, I really don't need to borrow the money. I just wanted to prove that I can do this. I'm teaching a class about private money. I've always wanted to do private money, but I've just been insecure or not educated enough or whatever the fear was. He's like, okay. But when all of a sudden I heard him like clicking on a calculator, he's like, well, that's only 3%, 3.66%. I was like, okay, how about $1,000? He's like, no problem. And he's like, I'm going to put a lien and a mortgage on it. I'm like, no problem. So he, after that was it. I called the title company. I said, hey, I got 2 people wiring the money and the other gentleman did all the paperwork. I showed up at closing. I got keys and I got cash at closing. So the point, I'm not trying to, toot my own horn. That this is from 1999. This has been in my mind. Well, since 2006, I really knew one day the banks were going to put a halt to loaning me money because I'm going to borrow as much money as I can to build as much wealth as I can, to have as much cash flow as I can. And I knew one day that the banks would put the brakes on me. And the only reason why the banks have even put the brakes on me just temporarily is because I just hit my lending limit. When you start working with banks, in this particular bank that I work with, they only have $48 million in assets. So there's a ratio that the government and compliance committee, you can only loan a certain percentage of what the assets of the bank is. And so the bank can only loan one individual $1.2 million. Well, I hit that limit and I was like kind of trapped. I'm like, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. And then I've just been doing the private money classes and talking to people. And then now it's infinite. It's supply and demand. It's outrageous. And the more that you study private money, and I definitely recommend Google it up, research it out, start telling people that you are a real estate investor, that you want to buy property, and don't have the fear that you can't get the deal done. What I've learned is that you always act like you can and it will happen. So I've been thinking about private money and boom, it happened. When I was in Indiana at the landlord conference that just happened in May, and definitely go to MrLandlord.com. You need to go to their conference. You just connect with people. Several of my closest friends I've met them through Mr. Landlord's conference. But I was just at that conference just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just hanging on the elevator, guys chatting with me, and he's a private lender and he loans money. I don't know what his percentage rate is, but the point is that I think there's infinite, unlimited, endless amount of money that you can work with and borrow. And the great thing about private money is that you don't need a college education. You don't need to be the savvy landlord. You can be an average schmo. You can be anyone. It doesn't matter who you are. You just put the deal together and ask people and orchestrate the transaction, and you can get it done. Simple. Man, hopefully this inspires you. This is just a quick podcast. Hopefully you didn't take this wrong, that I'm trying to talk about me and what I'm doing. Definitely text in at 545454. Ask your questions. Why are you not in real estate? Why are you not growing your business and finding financial freedom for yourself? What is your limiting belief? What is it? Find out what it is and how can you crush it. And this is how you crush fear. You crush fear by doing. I forced myself. I put myself in a pickle. I had to close on Thursday. I had to raise the money. It was Wednesday at 8 a.m. I did have the savings. I could get it funded, but I pushed myself and acted like I didn't have the money. And I just called and played the game. And then next thing you know, my deal is funded. Now, as I taught the class that night, Pat kind of blasted me. He's like, why didn't you raise 40? If the asset, the property that I was purchasing was worth 60, why didn't you fund it even more? Again, that was my limited belief. I just wasn't worthy. I thought that half of the contract price would be good enough. And then I pushed myself and raised the 30. Man, I could have asked 20 and 20, but I'm not greedy. I don't want to be all things. The house does need about $10,000 in repair. I do want to work hard through my cash flow and get the house ready to go. But now I know for my next private money inquiry or deal that I'm going to do, yes, I'm going to try to get it funded 100%. Thanks, Pat Point. If you didn't go to that class, we have another private lending class coming up. If it's something that you're interested in and you want to know more about, again, text me at 545454-ASK. Just text the word ask, say your question, and I'll get it on and I'll get back to you. Anyway, that's it for now. We got some great interviews coming up. Spread the word, forward this. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening. And I'm the Savvy Landlord.